The entire Aeldari Pantheon can be reborn. The Eldari have been dying as a race since their fall, when, due to their dark excesses, they birthed a god Slaanesh in the warp, and even 10,000 years later, she still hungers for their Eldari souls. They are a divided people, the Empire Aeldari on their Craftworlds, the Exodites living their safer way of life, and the Dark Aeldari, indulging that same excess in the webway, in places like Commoragh. Even the partial birth of their god Ynnead has given little hope, the final crone sword needed to fully awaken her proving hard to get. But what if her birth was just part of a larger plan? What if other gods could also return along with her, and the Eldari in the setting were further to realising this plan than they realise? Let's begin. Brief catch up to begin. For context, due to their dark leanings, creating it in the warp, the Eldari give birth to a dark god Slaanesh that eats most of the Eldari gods. Caleb and Chicane is shattered into shards, Eldari can call on for aid, Isha ends up a tortured slave in another chaos god's garden, Nurgle in this case, and the rest seem to die, with Kegrat the Trickster the only one who fully escapes. Quoting from Wild Rider, Anne in the head of Ivrain, who is the representative of Ynnead, who thinks about Lilith, who had been the moon goddess, creator of dreams and guide to good fortune. She had been the daughter of Isha, the mother of the Eldari, in turn granddaughter of the crone goddess, Moray Heg. It was the Hagseer that gave up her hand to Cain, so that she might drink her own blood and know her fate, and from whose finger bones the crone swords can be forged by Vol the smith. Myth held that Lilith had been gifted with a vision of Caleb and Chicane, being slain by the mortal descendants of Isha, and thus Cain had murdered Eldanesh, and the war in heaven started, dreams and death always intertwined. With a sudden sense of profound realisation, Ivrain saw the pattern within, the cycle of the Eldari that she sought to turn full circle, the gathering of those crone swords being the key. Ynnead, their god of death, was not simply the spirit of the Eldari, the sum of the reborn given life. She was the full incarnation of the maiden, mother, and crone. Ynnead was Lilith, granter of visions, Isha, birth giver to the Eldari, Moray Heg, holder of fate. All those parts were within her. She stood reeling, while the power of the revelation coursed through her. Had she been approaching her task wrong all of this time? She had thought it obvious that her quest was to unite the crone swords, and in that moment Ynnead would rise from her slumber to destroy the great enemy. But what if the crone swords were simply the means, not the end? She had been known as the daughter of shadows. Was she Ynnead's aspect of the moon, the mortal incarnation of Lilith? If so, then perhaps the keys of Moray Heg were simply a means to discover the mother and the crone. More parts click into place for Ivrain. Thoughts of Eldrad. When he was younger, he had been known as the Eye of Fate Unseen. Such was his power on the sky, that the only veil he could not pierce beyond was death itself, and even that he had tried to pierce, to bring about Ynnead on the sands of Commoragh. Could he be the crone? Farseers were the cultural descendants of the old priesthood of Moray Heg, the fate gatherers that had once acted as oracles in the Eldari dominion. Eldrad himself had been a pivotal force in reshaping that ancient worship into the rune law that had spread with the Azoyani path. And though he aged and the crystal curse of all seers grew in his veins, his longevity was remarkable. What the seer dismissed as simply being too stubborn to die perhaps had a more divine root. Did he know? Ivrain looked at her companions, seeing them afresh with the gaze of this knowledge. Millennial drew her eye, sat on one of the benches with hands clasped in his lap, fully armoured, spear beside him. It was not the autarch that fixated her, but the gemstone within his breast, the jewel of Cain, a symbol that Millennial was now host to, the war shard, Caleb and Chicane's greatest avatar, bearer of the actual blade and arrows that had slain Eldanesh, and others, not present for this pattern, fit the roles of the gods also who had died. Idreski Dreamspear, the Harlequin, the embodiment of the laughing god. What of her ally on Iyanden, Iana Arianel? The symbol of her craftworld was the flame of Azurian, the father of the gods himself, lord of the reborn phoenix. What of others, Hoek and Kurnus, Gia and Isha? Perhaps the fifth crone sword would not be revealed to her until the Pantheon had been assembled, gods in mortal form. She questions further, do the gods not also have souls? When the great enemy Slaanesh attempted to devour its Aeldari creators, not all were consumed. Commoragh escaped. Cain was shattered into the avatars of the bloody-handed. Other fragments might have survived. A piece or pieces of every god scattered throughout the Aeldari races, born again and again into mortal form. Just as the souls of the Aeldari themselves, she almost fainted with the weight of understanding, belief and disbelief warred. Her mind racked back and forth between the two, until all became blurred, her vision misting in physical sympathy. In this moment battle was imminent. She could afford no distractions. Ivrain resolved that the revelation was true, but that she could not yet reveal that purpose to the others. They seemed ignorant of their own divine heritage, and perhaps for good reason. The myths of the gods were full of deceit, infighting and treachery. Better that none of them harboured a high ambition than the service of Ynnead. And if she was to voice her new dream, would they believe her? I am well, she assured the others, straightening her gown. She had learned quickly in Commoragh that it was often better to say nothing, rather than a falsehood that could be disproved. Now, on a soul level, how could this work? We know on a larger level that characters can cut off aspects of themselves, their personality, their soul. Magnus the Red does so during the heresy, each part of him a different aspect of his own personality, as he sees it. We also see the Emperor do this. He casts off the goodness in him into the warp during the Horus heresy, so when he faces Horus, he will not need to hold back. So I think in that aspect it's supported within the lore, but small parts of a god are not the gods themselves. During the war in heaven, after being made by them, I believe the Old Ones taught the Aeldari to shape the warp, to create things from it, and that to embed aspects of things they believed in within their society. They crystallized these concepts in the form of gods. Now over time, with the loss of their creators, the Old Ones, the Aeldari fell to worshipping their gods, and so that creative process that had perhaps even let them fight alongside them had been lost. But what if they could find this again and draw on that knowledge and power to remake their gods from the small shards left that Ivrain believes might be within those she fought alongside? A group like that might also reunite the Aeldari race, as the members of it would be drawn from across the different aspects of them. It sounds like a good idea, but I think that would be too much of a win for the Aeldari. Now, do you think this is a story they will ever be realised with a follow-up? A small victory for them would be nice. Do you enjoy the addition of Ynnead to the lore? And do you think they will ever get that last crone sword? I doubt it at this point. Let me know in the comments, and if you like this video on the Aeldari, try this one.